Okay, everybody ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's class, the Winsor & Newton Cotman Watercolor Prickly Cacti Art Class. My name is Tim DePack, and I am from Winsor & Newton, and I'll be your moderator today. I'm being joined by Shailene Louise, who will be your artist instructor for this class. Sorry for that. She'll be taking you through today's class by providing information about the products being used, showing you some watercolor painting techniques, and creating this beautiful prickly pear cacti using our Winsor & Newton Cotman watercolor paints. In case you haven't got it yet, but there was a sketch that was available, provided the link on the sign up. If you've not printed out yet, you can find it in the chat in 1 second. I'll post it on the side for you. Also, I'd like to let you know that the class will be recorded, and in 24 hours, you can review it again on michaels.com or the Michaels YouTube channel. And we'll also add the link on the chat on the side as well for you, okay? And with that being said, you may choose to follow along and paint with Shailene, or sit back and relax with Shailene and watch this prickly cacti art and then create it on the replay. So with that said, I'm going to pass it over to Shailene.
All right. So today's class, as Tim mentioned, we're going to be painting a prickly pear cactus, which if you live in my part of the country, they're just about to start blooming like crazy. So this is going to be what we're going to be working towards as our finished product. So what we're going to start by doing is I'll talk you through supplies real quick, but we're going to sketch this together in real time. Some of you, if you got the sketch already, you've probably already sketched it out beforehand, which is awesome. But if you haven't, no worries, because I will take you through that. So talking through supplies really quick. For today, I'm going to be using a size 6, a size 3, and a size 1 round brush. These are all Cotman Winsor Newton round brushes. And these are my favorite type of watercolor brushes. I love to use round brushes. They're very multifunctional. If you have the Winsor Newton Cotman Pocket Sketcher set, we'll have all the colors we need to use today in here. We're going to be using lemon yellow, cadmium red, Veridian green, and burnt sienna. I like to use tube paint. So I actually have a palette here that I squeeze these colors into different little spots here, and it just kind of helps me to have everything on one surface. So, all right, I'm going to put that out of frame for just a moment. I'm going to use just a regular pencil, and I believe in the product, or in the description supplies list, I mentioned using either masking tape or a ruler today. You'll notice in my sketch over here that I've got these really straight lines. So if you are a little bit more of a beginner, if you feel a little bit unsure about your abilities to stay within the lines, I would recommend using masking tape if you have it. And I don't think any other tape is going to work like masking tape. Like, you can't use duct tape. You might ruin your paper. But if you feel confident about your ability to stay inside the lines, just go ahead and grab a ruler. This one I have is about maybe an inch and some change. And so what I'm doing is I'm just lining it up with the outer edge of my paper. And I'm just going to draw a straight line down on each side. This is the easy part. Doesn't take too much skill to get this part right, but once you have that, I thought I had an eraser out, but I don't, so I'm just going to use the one on my pencil. And I just want to make it a nice rectangular box. And then I'll draw my sketch just inside of there. And I didn't mention my paper here, but I'm using Winsor Newton cold press watercolor paper. This is a 9x12 sheet that I cut in half. So it is now 9x6. All right. So here we go. Let's sketch it out. So I'm going to start with So these are called pads, I believe, prickly pear pads. So I'm going to start with this pad that's unobstructed by anything in the bottom left corner here. I'm just going to draw this kind of like a little hill. And then let's draw this pad right behind it. This does not need to be perfect. I'm going to draw this little smaller pad that has a flower that's growing out of it. So I kind of have these little kind of spike shapes. I want to call them little leaves, but they're not leaves. I'm not sure what they are. They're just part of the flower. And then go ahead and draw some kind of ruffly looking leaves or petals, I should say. Make sense? And don't worry about drawing the little dots for now. I decided yesterday that I'm going to do that at the very end of the painting instead of having you draw it in pencil. If you've already done it, no worries, but I'm going to save that for the end. All right, so one large pad there, and then another one that's kind of just behind that one. And keep it all within your lines. And last detail here, draw these little lines that are just in front of the line we drew in the background here. And if you are unsure about your drawing abilities, what you can do is just pull this up on your computer, and you could put watercolor paper on top of your computer and trace it. You just got to go to a dark closet or a bathroom, just somewhere where it's kind of dark, and you should be able to trace it fairly easily. You could also print it out, hold it up to a window, and then hold some watercolor paper over it. There's a lot of little tricks you can do. All right, so I just drew this pad that's back here. And last one. So I have two little teeny pads up here at the top. And then time to work on this flower here. So the way I'm going to draw this flower is I'm going to start by just kind of getting it kind of placed so it's kind of a circular shape. And then I will start with the bottom. So we kind of have these two little leaves just underneath it. And I also realized I need to draw these little pads over here. So let me make that one a little smaller. Draw one pad here, and then one more here. No two sketches are ever quite the same. Unless I trace it, it's always going to look a little bit different. All right, so back to my flower. Let's see here. So notice that the edges of prickly pear flowers, they're kind of jagged, a little bit ruffled. So don't feel like this needs to be super smooth or perfect. I got one big petal there. And so notice this flower is not facing straight up, it's turning away from us. So as we're kind of going around, these petals are just going to get a little bit smaller. They're going to be facing upward and to the right. Nice ruffled edges. And the last detail is we're going to draw these stamen in the center of the flower. So let me hold that up for you real quick. So just be mindful of that shape. It's facing up towards the right. And I think that's a pretty good place to get started with some color mixing. So I'm going to pull this out of frame. If you still need it, just go to your the sign up page, and you can pull up that sketch. So color time. Okay, so I'm going to start by using my size 6 round brush. And I'm going to get a mixture of burnt sienna and Veridian green. And I'm just going to meet in the middle here. And just get the little kind of puddle going on your palette. I want it to be fairly watery, so you don't want your mixture to be too slow or syrupy kind of feeling. We want this to be a pretty translucent layer. So I like to work in 3 phases when I paint. I kind of have my first phase is doing the underwash, where I paint all of the lightest values on every single element. And then the second phase is I create form and deepen colors. And then the final stage is when I add details. So I really do paint in a lot of layers. So like I said, this is going to be just the underwash. We're just doing the lightest color value. And I want to start by larger pads. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 large pads. My goodness, I forgot one. I have one more up here in my sketch that I didn't draw. So I have 6 large pads, and then I have 6 little guys. So to start, just paint your larger pads, this mixture of burnt sienna and Veridian green. And so it's going to be a really lovely kind of desaturated green tone. And the larger brush that you're using and the more water that's in your bristles, the more ground you're going to be able to cover more quickly. So if you're using a really small brush to do this, you're going to have to keep going back quite a bit. So use a larger brush to do this, and make sure there's a good amount of water in your mixture. And if you did what I did, which is use a pencil just to draw these straight lines, just be super mindful on these outer edges to not go outside the lines. Like I said, if you're using masking tape, it'll be much easier to get a really clean edge. You don't have to worry about staying inside the lines as much. And I will say, I think that I might have to, I'm hoping that we'll be able to keep it, in 1 hour. But yesterday, when I was going over this class, I was like, might take a little longer than an hour, but we'll see how it goes. Try my best. It's a kind of deceptively easy looking painting. Deceptively simple, I should say. Not necessarily easy, but there's definitely a lot of steps we have to take to kind of get it to the detail level that I want it to be. And again, that mixture there is burnt sienna and Veridian green. If you don't have those exact colors, it's okay. Just mix whatever you have. It's not going to look like mine, but that's okay. It's going to look like yours. I always encourage people, don't worry about having the exact same colors. And even if you do have the same colors, if you want to use some other colors you like more, that's totally fine. This is your painting, so you can make it whatever you want it to be. And then my last pad down here at the bottom. Same color. Veridian green, burnt sienna, If you want it to be more green, more of a saturated green, I should say, you can use a little less burnt sienna. If you use more burnt sienna, it's going to be a little bit more of a brownish green. And that's always really fun to play with.
And it looks like you're pulling in very little bit of the burnt sienna on that, correct?
Yes.
Just dragging a little bit into it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not, I wouldn't say it's not a 50-50 mix. It's probably hard to say, but 60-40 or 70-30. I'm almost finished with this step here. And then we're going to move to our little cactus pads. And yesterday when I was going over it, I was not sure what any of these parts were even called. I had to Google it. I was like, wait, what are these little, I wanted to call them buds, but I guess they're technically pads because these will either turn into flowers or they'll turn into pads that look just like this. And then in the fall, these all turn kind of pink or purple. You'll kind of grow these little pink or purple parts, and those are called fruit. And I don't know if you guys know, but prickly pears are, I guess they're all totally edible. Every bit of them. I don't know what they taste like, but. Okay, so next step here. I'm going to use the same mixture, which is burnt sienna, Veridian green, and a little bit of lemon yellow. So I want these little pads to be a little bit more of a yellow green. And I feel like that makes them look like they're a little bit younger, like they're little new offshoots. Like anytime you get new growth on a plant, it's always going to be a brighter green color. So adding that yellow to the mixture is going to really help us get there. And so starting up at the top, just go ahead and paint that mixture of all three colors, a little bit of burnt sienna, a little bit of Veridian green, and a little bit of lemon yellow. And it's going to get us a totally unique shade.
I'd like to say thank you to everyone in the chat who's given us some information on this plant here, that the fruits are called tunas from Deb Meyer. And the pads, Moby said the pads have a mild sour taste like papayas, only a little bit milder.
Oh.
Someone says that you can use them. They're great for smoothies and taste like a strawberry blackberry mix. And someone else also says they taste like kiwi and pears.
Those all sound amazing. It's not what I expected.
Something great for the summer months coming up, right?
Yeah. Yeah, speaking of smoothies, I was making a smoothie this morning and my smoothie maker busted. All of the milk that was in there started coming out of the motor. So that's fun. But a smoothie does sound really good. I'm gonna have to go buy one later. Okay, so, and also I just love that everybody, like anytime I do any of these classes and I ask a question about the particular flower, I love that there's always people who are so knowledgeable about botany. I always end up learning a lot, so I appreciate that. Okay, I'm gonna take a quick drink of water and let this dry for a second. I am 8 months pregnant right now, and I am so thirsty all the time. So, okay, last green detail I'm going to do is I'm going to come back to this green mixture. I'm going to make it a little bit darker too, so add a little bit more color here. And I'm going to paint just underneath this flower. We kind of have these little green leaf spots. So I'm going to go ahead and just paint that there. All right. So I want you to get a mixture now of something we have not used yet. Actually, before I do that, let's grab a little bit of lemon yellow, just pure lemon yellow in its pure form, and go ahead and drop it at the center of this flower here. So that area there is called the stamen. So drop a really strong yellow mixture there. And then I want you to get a mixture of lemon yellow and cadmium red. I want this to be a pretty strong mixture. So lemon yellow, and do about 50-50 here. And I always just kind of, look at it, eyeball it till it's the right color and the right consistency. So I do want it to move very easily. I don't want it to be too syrupy. So make sure there's a good amount of pigment in that mixture. And then I want you to, let's see, go ahead and paint your flower petals. If you're nervous about the areas that you just painted, like right here, if your pad just underneath this flower is still a little bit wet, just don't go all the way down to the green and just kind of paint the upper part of the petals. And I'm actually going to switch to a smaller brush. Size 6 is too large for this. So I'm switching down to my size 3.
Shailene, what was the colors you mixed on that again? That was the lemon yellow along with the
Cadmium red.
cadmium red. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Right. So smaller brush here, I'm able to have a little bit more control as I paint. So just an FYI, the smaller the brush, the more control you have. The larger the brush, the less control you have. But the larger the brush, the more quickly you can paint larger areas faster. All right, so I'm going to, it's kind of tricky. Make sure that this is perfectly in frame here. So do the same technique up here for these petals. Like I said, if you're nervous about the green that you just painted, just don't touch the green to the orange right now. You can just come back and do this in a few minutes. The center that I just painted is still a little bit wet, but I'm not too worried about that because I'm using yellow and cadmium red and it's all going to end up looking the same anyways. Okay. And I'm not doing this super cleanly or perfectly. Like I mentioned earlier, the flowers are kind of a rough look, like they have the jagged edges bit. So I don't care to make this super smooth looking. Feels like a good place to stop. Okay, so that is what I call phase 1. That is the underwash. So we don't have a lot of detail yet. We don't have a lot of form yet. We just have the lightest colors. And now is the part where I start to really add some detail. So let me hold this up for you real quick, just in case that is helpful to anybody. That is the underwash. All right, so next phase, let's start building some detail. So I'm going to use the same mixture of colors. So I'm using burnt sienna, and I'm going to use my larger brush again. So back to the size 6. And I'm just going to manage some expectations here. I think that the hardest part about this painting, for me personally, is the pads themselves. I think that it is a little bit tricky to get the texture right. And we really don't want them all to look the same color like they do right now. I want there to be a lot of variegation. I want there to be strong contrasts, dark and light. And it's going to take a little bit of work to get there. So looking at the clock, I think we're going to do good. I'm hopeful.
Just to let everybody know, the class is being recorded. Mm-hmm. So if you want to go back and watch this again within 24 to 48 hours, it will be available on the michaels.com website as well as the Michaels YouTube channel. I just dropped the links in the chat on the side if you want to save those links there for you for future use. And I always share, if you follow me on Instagram, I always share the replays. I have a story highlight
on there called Michael's. And I have all of the links to the past classes. And then the past classes are actually on YouTube. So in the description of the YouTube videos, you'll be able to find the supplies lists and the sketches. Okay, I need to explain what I'm doing real quickly here. So I just dropped a mixture of burnt sienna and Veridian green along the outer left side of this pad here. And I just cleaned this brush and I blotted it on a paper towel. So now it's just a clean, damp brush. So I'm using two brushes. I use one brush to drop color, and then I use another brush to create a gradient, a smooth gradient. Make sense? And I'm going to drop that darker color. Make sure you got a good amount of pigment in your brush here too. I want a dark color. Watercolor dries very light. It always does. As soon as it kind of absorbs into the paper, it's going to lose some of the depth, the darkness. So just be mindful of that. You can drop a little bit of extra dark color here. And let's go ahead and let's just go all the way around this little pad here. I'm going to keep just that outer edge light. You see what I'm doing there? Just that outer edge, I'm keeping it light. And then I'm using my clean, damp brush to gently pull that color, feather it. I always blot my brush. As soon as I have too much color in it, I blot it on a paper towel. I like to keep it clean. All right. And this is a process. This is what takes me the longest, at least when I first painted it. The original painting for this class, I probably spent at least a couple hours on it. And then I kind of try and condense my process and make it as quick as possible, but we'll see how it goes.
Just going to give you a reminder, we're 30 minutes into the class. We got 30 minutes left.
Perfect. I don't think I've gone over on a class yet, but we'll see. I think we'll be okay.
We will continue to proceed if you run past it. So everyone
Cool.
out there, don't worry. We're not going to let the class not get finished.
Well, worst case scenario, I'll hold up the finished version. We can just talk through it, but I think we'll be good. All right, so same technique here. Just drop some dark color and then smooth it out with my size 3 brush. And drop some darker color on the right side of this little pad. And I'm keeping that outer edge just a little bit lighter, like I did over here. And that just kind of creates the illusion that it's very thin, that it's a thin pad. We don't want these to look like baseballs or footballs. We don't want them to look round. We want them to look flat because that is their shape. They're like little pancakes. All right, and keep on moving to this bottom pad here. I was telling Tim right before this class started that we have some neighbors who just moved in and they have 2 dogs. And we have a little toy Australian Shepherd, and she is very stressed out by their presence. So you'll probably hear her barking a few times today. She's the cutest dog in the world, but she's very neurotic. All right, so I want to deepen that color just a bit more, the bottom left corner. I want to try and create a really smooth gradient. Pull that up just a bit. And if you guys need me to hold it up to the camera, just let me know in the comments. I mean, I guess I can't do it every minute, but I can probably do it at least every few minutes. Sometimes I forget.
And maybe after you finish that petal right there, maybe
Yeah.
people can see that part there.
Yeah.
It's really great because you can see that dimension on there building up.
I hold that up there. All right, so you can see we're starting to create some form, right? These 3 pads look a lot more interesting than these ones. So we're just playing with the contrast. We're playing with dark and light values, and that's how we create form. And it gives it interest and it gives it life, makes it look a little more real. And so we're just focusing on the larger pads right now. Don't worry about the little guys. We'll come back to those in a few minutes. I'm trying to stay inside the lines here.
Real quick question on someone from the audience was asking. So when you're pulling the brush up to create the gradient, is that the brush is dry, correct?
It's damp. It's definitely, I can't get it fully dry, but I blot it on my paper towel, and I find that I'm able to, if it's not wet, if it's not wet, if it's just damp, I'm able to just very gently, like what I'm doing right now, I'm really gently manipulating that color edge. And it helps me have a little bit of control with where that color is going.
So you're working with the water that's already down there from the paint previous.
There's already a little bit of water there. So I try and keep it as dry as possible, but it's not bone dry. It's just damp. But yes, the less water you're working with, the more control that you're going to have there. And so if your paper's super watery, it's going to be difficult. But this is all just, water control is something you have to practice with and experiment with. And the more you paint with watercolors, the more comfortable you're going to be with it. I understand that it's a little bit of probably a trickier technique than I let on. So definitely don't beat yourself up if that's kind of a tricky technique to master, especially as a beginner.
When you're doing this, is there a particular, I know you're using the 140-pound cold press paper. Is that really make the difference in the work that you're doing by using that particular type of paper as opposed to another type?
Well, you have to use watercolor paper with these techniques that I'm doing. You can't use, I mean, there's been a couple of times where people have came to one of these classes and they've done it on printer paper or even mixed media, you could probably pull it off. But if it's not real watercolor paper, if it's not designed for water, it's not going to work. You'll find that the paper starts to kind of pill. You'll get these little kind of drops. And the reason it works really well is because this is cotton, or at least a cotton blend. And you don't want to use wood paper. You don't want to use paper made from trees for this. It just doesn't work the same way, okay? And yeah, you can use a thicker watercolor paper. I think there's 300 pound. I typically just use 140. It works pretty well for me. All right, and so I'm just kind of dropping more color, smoothing it out. I just want this kind of bottom part to be a little bit darker. Actually, I'm going to, this part here that is kind of in shadow, let's create a shadow there. So just drop some dark color here along this edge. And that's going to help create that feeling that there's a depth kind of dimension here between these two pads. I want to have some depth. See how that makes it look like it's just a little bit further behind it? And then we have 2 more pads to go. So just keep this mixture going on your palette here. A lot of times I have to just kind of keep mixing the 2 colors as I go, because I'll use it all up. Okay, I'm going to start on the outer left side of this pad and go all the way up. Go along this upper edge here. And then using my damp clean brush, I'm going to smooth it throughout the rest of the pad. you might find that you want to use a brush that's a more similar size to the one that you drop color with. So if you've got a brush that's maybe a 5 or another brush that's a 6, you might find that to be a little bit more easy. You could also just rinse off your brush in between, which is something I used to do. I would drop color with one brush and then clean it off and then do that technique. You do end up using up a bit more paint, but it's okay. One of my friends, her name is Sarah Simon. She's a watercolor painter as well, but she had a quote recently and she said, "The only paint you waste is the paint you don't use." And I thought that was one of the best quotes I've ever heard because I definitely felt like I used to waste, quote, waste paint by rinsing it off, every single time I would use the brush, rinse the color, use the brush, rinse the color. But I think that's a great way to look at it. You're never wasting paint when you're painting, when you're learning, when you're discovering. Okay. You know what I think I want to do actually? I'm going to paint this top edge of this pad here. I'm going to paint it a darker color. I think that looks nice. And I'm going to smooth that out and hold it up for you to take a look at it. All right. And I'm going to move over to this last large pad here. So I want this one to do, we're going to do the same technique I did between these two. I want to make this pad that's behind this one here a bit more in shadow. I'm using my size 6 round brush to do this technique here. So look at this color. So I'm dropping a very heavily pigmented mixture here. So there's a lot of color in my bristles. And then I'm actually going to do the same technique, that technique I was showing you with this brush, but I'm actually going to use the same brush. So I'm rinsing it off, blotting it, and I'm going to use that larger brush, the size 6, to smooth that color into the rest of the pad. If that color isn't moving, if it's kind of feeling like it's a little bit stuck, you might need a little bit more water. And like I said, that's just all about learning water control is just something you get familiar with the more you paint. You start to feel when you need just a little bit more water. Okay. Before we forget, I wanted to mention if you're painting along with me today and you're happy with what you create, we would love it if you guys shared it on social media. You can just use the tags, make it with Michael's classes, and be sure to tag me and Winsor Newton. And if you enjoy taking classes with me, I always will either let you know either on Instagram or if you get on my newsletter, I'll let you know about any future classes. The newsletter is probably the best way because Instagram's tricky. You definitely don't always see everybody's posts over there. So I actually, Tim, we've got 2 more classes coming up in May, right? I think we're doing a peony and a bouquet painting in May. Okay, so I'm going to move over to our little pads now. So I'm going to use the same mixture, burnt sienna, Veridian green, and a little bit of lemon yellow. So I'm working with the same colors I used for the underwash, but I'm going to create just a darker, stronger, more pigmented mix of color. And I'm going to do the same exact technique that I did earlier. So I'm going to drop some color there. I'm using my smaller brush, the size 3 brush. Drop some color. And then let's smooth it through the rest of the pad. I dropped the color on the left side because I'm kind of imagining the light is coming from this side. So we'll let the right side of the pads be just a little bit lighter. And then go ahead and do that technique on all 6 of these little pads. So I'm dropping the color with the size 3 round brush. And then I'm actually mixing it up here, and then I'm using the size 6 to smooth that color throughout the rest of the pad. And that mix of colors there, again, is burnt sienna, Veridian green, and a little bit of lemon yellow, which gives us the more bright green color. And I'm going to hold this up for you in just 1 second.
As Shalene is doing that, I'll let everybody know that the class is being recorded, and within 24 hours from now, you'll be able to view this again to go back and follow along with Shalene on this. And it'll be on michaels.com or the Michaels YouTube channel.
Okay, so let me hold that up for you. So you can see we've got a lot more dimension than we did, don't we? Starting to come to life. So, okay, I'm going to go over to the flowers real quick. And I'm going to use my size 3 brush. And I'm going to just use cadmium red here. So just, let's see, get that in frame for you. Can you see it? There's my little cadmium red mixture going here. And getting a lot of color in my bristles here. I'm using the size 3 brush. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop color in this flower, and I'm going to drop it just kind of on the right side of each of these little petals. Okay. So basically I want to try and create a bit of a shadow using this color. So basically in those little crevices, and I'll hold this up for you in just a sec so you can kind of see what I'm doing here. But I'm painting just to the right side of all of those lines I drew earlier. That makes sense?
And that's the cad red that you're using right now, correct?
Mm-hmm. Just pure cadmium red, nothing mixed into it. And I'm just going to pull that color up and out just a little bit. Right. And I'm going to do the same technique down at this bottom one. I'm actually going to drop just a little bit more color because I can see that it's already drying a little bit lighter than the ultimate color I want to get to. So just dropping a little bit more color. Okay, and then down here, let's do that same thing. So I'm painting on the right side of the pencil markings that I can see. Just kind of creating a little bit of shadow there. See how that looks? And then I'm just going to rinse that color off. So I have a damp, clean edge. And then I can use that brush to just smooth it out just a bit. I'll do the same thing up here. All right, so I think that's a good place to pause for the flowers, and I'm going to come back to the pads. So an obvious thing that I feel like it's pretty much time to do is we're going to start getting ready to draw the little spines or spikes that come off of the cactus. So you know how like cactuses always have these little dots. We're going to just go ahead and kind of eyeball it. So we're going to get a mixture here of burnt sienna and Veridian green. So the color we've been using for our cactus pads, I want to use those same two colors, but this is going to be like the darkest, most saturated mixture here. I want this color here to feel like molasses. I want it to be very, very slow to mix on your palette. And the way we do that is we don't use too much water. Okay, so get a very dark mixture of these two colors. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start up here at the top. And go ahead and just for these little tiny pads, let's just drop, actually, might even want to use a smaller brush. I have a size 1 here. I'm going to do this with a very fine brush. And I'm going to do maybe like, for these little tiny pads, maybe like 5 or 6 little dots on each of them. Kind of makes them look like little green chocolate chip cookies, doesn't it? And we'll do the same technique on the larger pads. So just kind of, there's not too much of a method in how I'm doing this. I'm kind of just starting at the bottom left and kind of working my way up right. Feels like there's a little, maybe like a centimeter between each of my little dots. And make sure you're not using too much water here, or else your dots might start to look really large. And I want them to be small, very controlled. So the less water you're using and the smaller the brush, the more control you have. Okay, I'm gonna say that one more time. The less water you're using and the smaller the brush you're using, that's the maximum control that you're gonna have. It's basically called a dry brush technique. Some people refer to it as a dry brush. I never really understood that because it's not technically dry, but it's just got a very small amount of water. And forgive me for just kind of quickening my pace here, just because I want to keep us on schedule.
I think we're doing all right. We're about 8 minutes before the top of the hour, but if we need to run over, we're perfectly fine with that.
Okay. What I'll do is I'll show you the finished version, and if I need to go longer, and if anybody wants to stick around, maybe we'll do that.
Great to look at, but you would never want to touch those paddles.
I've done it. It hurts. It hurts real bad. I found one out in the mesa, and I took a little shovel. It was very small, you guys, but I wanted to plant it in my garden, and I did that, and I got punished for that. Poked me so bad.
I
They're
found out the
beautiful,
hard way
but
too, same way a long time ago, and I
yes.
promised myself never to touch. They just you just want to touch them, and it's just like stay away.
Yeah. Actually, people use them as walls here in New Mexico, and I saw it a lot up in northern New Mexico. But people will just kind of use them as fences because they're great protection from anybody, coyotes, from people, from intruders. All right, so this is kind of a fun little technique I'm going to do here. So I'm going to wet my size 6 brush. Damp, I want it to be damp and clean. And then I'm going to do, this is something that is kind of unnecessary, but I just think it adds so much to it. And I'm just going to so gently, just using the barely wet tip there. I just want to pull that color that I just painted downward. And that's going to help me just get a little bit of texture on these pads. Because like I said, the texture of prickly pears, it's not exactly smooth. When you see them up close, there's a little bit of a just texture to them. And I found that this is the best way to get that texture. And so it's hard to tell on Zoom. So I'm going to hold this up for you in just one moment here. All right, so let me show you while I'm doing it. Just notice how that color just gently gets pulled down. Okay, so you can do that for the rest of the pads, but I'm gonna hold off for a moment because I actually want to jump back to finishing this flower up here. So the last detail I'm going to do on my flower is I'm going to get a mixture of cadmium red and a little bit of burnt sienna. So it's going to make it like a very rich, kind of rusty red color. So burnt sienna and cadmium red, beautiful rust color. All right, and then I'm going to drop that even darker color here. And all those spots where I dropped the darker orange color earlier, let's just deepen that depth of color. You can do the same thing down here. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and drop that color right here in this stamen, in this yellow section. I want there to be some orangish spots. And then using my damp, clean edge, I smooth that color up and out just a little bit. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm okay with this flower being a little more rugged looking. Doesn't have to be super smooth or perfect looking. Okay. And final detail here. I'm going to use my smallest brush, the size 1 round brush. Come back to that really strong mixture that we mixed earlier. So that's Veridian green and burnt sienna. And this is a final detail part. This is the final detail here. So make sure that when you start to do this, that everything is finished underneath it. Okay. So I'm going to start with this pad right here because I'm definitely finished with that one. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw these little spines, and you can draw one coming off of each or two. Use the least amount of water here. I want these spines to be very thin. And also remember to stay inside the lines here, this outer edge. And this is a mixture of burnt sienna and Veridian green. And I'm using my smallest brush here. And you want to make sure your painting is super dry underneath it. Okay, maybe some of these little dots don't have spines coming off of them. They're very, when you see them in person, they're very imperfect looking. And that's what's the detail of these things in person is so amazing. But that's one thing I always notice is they're always a little bit scrappy looking. A lot of times over here they have bites taken out of them because coyotes come and eat them. So there's often just big old holes, chunks taken out of them.
When you get one of those paddles done, Shailene, can you hold that up to the camera so people can see that detail?
Yes. Okay. Hold that up for you. Some of my spikes look a little bit darker than I wish, and that was just because there was maybe a little bit too much water in these first couple, but like I said, imperfect is kind of what's awesome about these plants. They definitely don't need to look perfect, and it's still going to look so cool. All right, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys my finished version. So I'm going to swap it out. Ready? Ready for the big reveal? Okay. So here's my finished version. So I want to just point out a couple of things. So just notice the texture here. So I did that same technique that I was showing you earlier, where I kind of pulled down that color just from the center dots, just ever so slightly. And that gives us that really lovely kind of almost like a rippled texture to the pads. And I have that those very light little spines using the smallest brush you have. What else? Oh, big detail. I erased my pencil lines. So that's something you have to wait to do until the very end. Once you're painting, and you might want to go take a break, give it 30 minutes, let it really, really dry, and then erase all your pencil lines. Okay. So those lines there, I'm going to wait to erase them for a while. And there you have it. That's the finished product. I could take a little bit more time to finish this other one, but I don't know if that's super necessary. I feel like you guys probably understand because I did show you all the techniques. One thing I do want to show you, hey, Tim, would you remind me what day the next class is? Is it May?
Sure. The next
7th?
class that you will be doing will be on May 4th.
And that's the
And that will be the
bouquet.
Mother's Day bouquet.
Okay, so I actually have that one here, so I'll show you guys. So this is going to be the next painting we do together. So it's kind of more of a loose painting. And I'm looking forward to this one because we're going to use a ton of different colors. And it's going to be more of a loose, fun technique. Not quite so controlled and detailed. So you guys can go sign up for that one. And I hope I see you guys there. Is there any other questions about this painting before we sign off?
I think we
And
have
also,
a lot of questions asked within the chat we're in there. I would like to say, if you'd feel okay to hold up your pictures, your screen for those of you that are using the video, so we can all take a look. Hold it up there for a couple seconds because we have a couple pages to go through.
Oh my goodness.
Check everyone's
So
work.
cool.
Great work. Wow. Just hold it on for a couple more seconds, please. I got a couple more to look through. There's so many great ones out here.
I know it's so hard to take them all in so quickly. These are amazing.
Wow.
You guys be sure to share these on social media so I can just zoom in on all the little details.
Yes, please do that. We'd love to see the work that everyone is doing on there. And if I can go real quick, and I will drop in the chat on the side over here all of this hash marks and stuff like that we have on here for you. I'm going to put it in the chat. And just to let everybody know, the class is recorded. So if you need to go back within 24 to 48 hours, everyone will be able to log in and check it out, michaels.com or their Michaels YouTube channel, where you can review this whole demonstration here going on. Also, within the next 24 hours or so, you will be getting a survey coming in after the class. So we ask that you take part in that and let us know how we're doing, myself and Shailene, with the class. There's also a comment section on there. If there's anything else you'd like to see in the future, please drop that in there as well and let us know how we're doing on this.
Cool. My dogs just came to say hello, but thank you guys so much for joining. We'll see you hopefully in May.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. Have a great one.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.